the fact that Trump survived that assassination, it was so close. It was miraculous that he survived, and that he's already got a big ego. We already know, he's a bit of a narcissist. That, coupled with the fact that he survived this assassination attempt, might be building a bit of a God complex within him. And maybe that's being fueled by the Zionists around him that know they can manipulate him and use it. It's like, look, you were meant to do great things. You were, to really have sort of feeding a bit of megalomania in him. Because we're seeing this talk about, making Canada the 51st state, taking Greenland. We can take Iran. Maybe we can take the oil fields. And he's got this way in his mind that he can recreate something and make America fantastic. He's unstoppable. He's anointed almost. And maybe all the Zionists and the Netanyahu administration kind of understand that and are able to feed into it, and it's helping them propel them down this path. Yeah. Do you think there's anything to do that's a...
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's kind of, I think we're certainly seeing signs of megalomania. And I think actually the recent tariff announcement is an example of that. In fact, I don't think there are a whole lot of people pushing him to do this, probably very few. And this is something that just was in his own head. I mean, he's always had a preference for tariffs. And like I said, there can be arguments in favor of tariffs in certain cases. But this, this worldwide, Liberation Day that we've talked about. I mean, I think it's just something that sprang out of his head. And, even though the stock market is crashing or whatever, he seems to be he's very confident that it's going to work. And I don't think it's anything that anybody has been telling him, because there really isn't a faction for that kind of tariffs, certainly within the political class or, within the economic elite. I think it's another sign of kind of a, like you say, a megalomania, a kind of a, and it's worrying, it's one thing, this is a problem, or, Trump embodies, let's say, in kind of rather extreme form, a trend that we've seen in the U.S. political system over the last few decades, and that is an increasing concentration in the power of the chief executive, the president. In the past, these executive orders were used very sparingly. If you go decades in the past, but over the years, presidents started to realize that this was a way to circumvent Congress. What they would do is invoke emergency powers. There's an emergency, and therefore I have made this order. And we saw Biden do that. We saw Obama and previous presidents do that. And I remember actually conservatives, expressing worry about the Democratic administration's use of these executive orders and saying, this isn't right. This should go through the legislature, through the Congress. But in the end, there really has been a bipartisan. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, there's been a bipartisan responsibility, for the expansion of executive orders, and now we have this person Trump, who maybe does believe he's on some sort of mission from God, or is just supremely self-confident. I'm not saying that he actually has this belief. I haven't seen any signs of that. He hasn't used that kind of language. But he's supremely self-confident. And maybe that self-confidence does come in part from, that assassination attempt. That was, his survival really was miraculous, or nearly miraculous. So he's got the supreme self-confidence, and he does see himself as a great leader, and believes very strongly that he's going to achieve great things. And now he finds this political system that has concentrated a lot of power in his hands, much more than, let's say, a president 20, 30, 40 years ago. He's got this power. He can just, invoke an emergency power and issue an executive order. And that's what we're seeing. Now, it may be that, the courts and Congress is not showing any signs of fighting back. Maybe the courts will, but potentially you might just ignore the courts. We'll see.